Hey adventurers, so today is going to be another book review. This is going to be for The Once and Future King by T.H. White. This is, of course, an Arthurian tale. It's a fantasy, it's mythology. It's kind of it's a classic, one of the stories that everybody says, oh, you should read this book. If you like Arthurian literature, it's one of the ones that people say you have to read this book. It is one of the quintessential Arthurian tales. So, The Once and Future King by T.H. White is considered by many to be one of the best pieces of Arthurian literature to have ever been written. It's loved by so many and has inspired many other retellings, adaptations, and so much more. This is an interesting one for me though. I love Arthurian literature and this book is extremely easy to read. I actually started reading this book a few years ago but quickly stopped because I started an Arthurian literature class during college, and the first book that we were supposed to read for that class was Le Morte d'Arthur, and I couldn't do them both at the same time. It was just too much. I had another book going physically at the same time, and then I had the book that I had to read for school, and I couldn't do The Once and Future King at the same time. I needed to focus only on one massive Arthurian literature story at a time, basically. Before I'd started that class though, I had read the first 4 chapters of this book. But I stopped and really didn't get back around to it until this year. And this is kind of I'm excited to do this review because I have a lot of thoughts on this book, but it's probably going to be a long review because there's a lot that I need to say. So I can also see some people getting frustrated or angry or mad at me for this review, or offended by this review to some degree, and that's just going to be the way that it is because I have thoughts on this book. So I decided to reread those first chapters since I really didn't remember everything about it, and I wanted to go into the story fresh and just read the story as a whole rather than try and remember those 5 chapters that I missed, because there's some important stuff that happens in those first 4 chapters, I guess, not 5 chapters. This is where things start to change. I made it through those first chapters and moved on. I quickly came to the realization that as easy as it was to read, and as much as I liked the world, I wasn't loving the story. I pushed on through knowing that it would improve. After all, everybody loves this book. Obviously, it's going to improve if everybody loves it. But my dislike continued. We reached the end of book 1, which is sort of in the stone, and I could see how everything tied together, and I could appreciate the storytelling, and I could see how Wart could truly become the King of Albion. But overall, it was fine. Like, it wasn't great. It was just fine. But I hoped that it would get better, so I continued on. Book 2, which is The Queen of Air and Darkness, did some wonderful stuff. Very creepy, dark moments, and an introduction to the Orkney boys, showing their brotherhood in a wonderful way. But again, I lost interest in the story itself. We get to book 3, which is The Ill-Made Knight, and this is probably my favorite part of it's hard. Book 3 and book 4 are kind of both my favorite parts for different reasons. So we get to book 3, The Ill-Made Knight, and that one got better as it went rather than getting worse like the previous 2 had. But I still didn't love the overarching story that was being told. Finally, we reach book 4, and I'm enjoying it. I enjoyed the book 3 more as it continued, and book 4 kind of continued that. There's a time jump, but it takes us to a place where I was excited to get to, and all the way through I enjoyed book 4. I didn't love everything about it though, but largely it was more positive thoughts and opinions with this 4th book, which is, I didn't write it down, it is an air, The Candle in the Wind is the 4th book. Normally I don't really share my reading journey like I just did here, but I think that in this case it's important to understand where I'm coming from with this, so now I can continue with the review. This is the part that might offend some people, might make them not like me anymore, but this is my opinion, and if you don't like it, that's fine. This book, to me, seemed almost disrespectful of the Arthurian legend. And that's, hopefully you'll see my reasoning as I go on through this, and don't just shut me off at that point. White feels like he's attempting to write 3 different books here in The Once and Future King. He's attempting one that is heavily philosophical and thoughtful book, and then he's attempting one that is his own retelling of the Arthurian story. It's intended to be fun and lighthearted, and then he's attempting to update or modernize Le Morte. So that's the three stories that he's trying to tell. And herein lies the issue. It doesn't work. None of these three end up blending well. The philosophical book doesn't fit with the tone of the rest, nor is it as deep as White thinks it is. The Mallory is just straight Mallory, which he does acknowledge. And this is mostly good, and I did enjoy it, but I'd rather just read Mallory if I'm going to read about Mallory, Mallory's Le Morte. His own retelling is fun at times, and it's the most consistently enjoyable, except that this is where I feel like it doesn't take the legend seriously, and that it almost seems disrespectful. In some ways it's not, and it's not so much the actions being taken or the magic or the world building, though all of those things do seem weird at times. There's some weird moments. But rather it's the way that he's actually writing the book and telling this story that just, it doesn't quite seem respectful. The three books do kind of come together and start to work with each other by the end of the book, but it's not soon enough, and it's not really enough to fix the issues from earlier. It's really a pretty mixed bag for me, and a lot of this may sound pretty negative, but there are a lot of things that I enjoyed as well. The character of Mordred is fantastic. He's creepy and weird and unnatural, but so interesting. This book genuinely made me want to read more about his character, a character that I've always hated and have never cared about reading more about, like one that I would be perfectly happy if adaptations left out, except that I know how important he is. And so, as much as I hate the character of Mordred, this book made me really want to read more books about him, more stories with Mordred in it, and actually I have one called Mordred's Curse by Ian McDowell sitting on my shelf that I really want to get to, and we'll see if I can get to that one sooner rather than later. I don't know that I will. This book also does a good job at incorporating one of the major themes of Arthurian literature, and that is that when things get too good, we create problems for ourselves. This is what leads to the Grail quest, and ultimately the destruction of Camelot and this world that Arthur forged. I want to read a paragraph from this book because it really sums up in a better way than it sums up in an in-world way what I'm trying to say here. I want to see if I want to set any of the scene for this at all. Basically, this is a discussion between Guinevere and Lancelot and Arthur, who are all really good friends with each other. Of course, there's more stuff going on with Guinevere and Lancelot that Arthur refuses to acknowledge. He knows about it, he sees it, he refuses to acknowledge it in order to keep the kingdom going. That continues on through the rest of the book as well. But there's this idea that Arthur's been fighting against from day one of this book, that might makes right. And he's been fighting against that idea and trying to train his knights out of that idea. And for a while there was ogres, in fact it'll say it all in this in a second. So that's kind of where we're at, is this idea that Arthur has been fighting against this idea of might makes right for his entire career at this point. So let's read this. Simply because we have got justice. We have achieved what we were fighting for, and now we still have fighters on our hands. Don't you see what has happened? We have run out of things to fight for, so all the fighters of the table are going to rot. Look at Gawain and his brothers. While there were still giants and dragons and wicked knights of the old brigade, we could keep them occupied, we could keep them in order. But now that the ends have been achieved, there's nothing for them to use their might on, so they use it on Pellinore and Lamorak and my sister, God be good to them. The first sign of the fester was when our chivalry turned into games mania, all that nonsense about who had the best tilting average and so forth. This is the second sign, when murder begins again. That is why I say that dear Merlin would want me to start another thinking now, if only he were here to help. And that's basically this idea of while you have things to keep you occupied, you are able to get rid of that might makes right idea. You're able to go slay the dragons, go slay the bad knights that are evil, that need to be taken down, that need to be removed from the picture, but eventually you deal with all the issues and there's no more issues and everything's good, everything's happy. And what happens is you the people, start to become the thing that you swore to destroy, essentially. So interestingly enough though, this is not just a theme for Arthurian literature, and as much as important as it is to Arthurian literature, it is what I like to call timeless politics. There's other examples I really like to use, and this term came about from my discussions regarding Star Wars, is this idea that George Lucas uses a lot of timeless politics in his movies, in his storytelling. They're things that aren't relevant to specifically today. They're relevant to any time period in history that you can possibly go to. And that's one of this theme of, or this idea of, when things get too good, we create problems for ourselves, is one of those ideas that I would consider timeless politics. You can look at the state of the United States right now, and you can see that we're here exactly. I don't really want to talk politics on this channel, and that's not what this review is about or anything like that, but it's here and it's easy to see. So overall, a ton of mixed thoughts on this book. I cannot consider it the world's, let's see, it says the world's greatest fantasy classic on there. Ursula K. Le Guin says that I have laughed at White's great Arthurian novel and cried over it and loved it all my life. I don't know that I can consider it the greatest Arthurian tale or anything else. To me, it didn't work. Would I ever reread it? Probably. And I definitely do intend to read the Book of Merlin, which is the 5th part of this story, or separate, because it's not specific. From what I understand, it's about Merlin and not about Arthur, but it's the same Merlin that is in this book. That is, if I can ever find it. So I don't hate the book, but it just didn't work for me like I wanted or I expected it to. And that's frustrating and it's sad. I don't know. Like, I know so many people love this book, but I read it and it wasn't all that people make it out to be. So that is my review for The Once and Future King. Thank you guys for watching an Erudite adventure and bearing with me in this probably rather lengthy review for me. Hopefully you guys can understand where I'm coming from with this one. We have our social medias linked in the description down below, and we'll see you guys again soon. Stay warm.